This is Percy Shelley, and I'm Sarah, and we're going to review The Imperfects by Amy Meyerson. This book combines historical fiction, mystery, and an engaging family saga. It's also about the Florentine diamond, a 137-carat diamond that once belonged to the Medicis and later the Habsburgs, and later still was lost in the mid-1900s. The worth is estimated at $10 million. The story revolves around Helen, the grandmother and matriarch of a tumultuous family. Deborah, her daughter, abandoned her 3 children in Helen's care as she pursued a number of failed business ventures and poor romantic choices. Deborah's youngest child, Beck, remained with Helen the longest, moved nearby as an adult, and cared for her until Helen's death at the age of 92. In Helen's will, Beck is appointed as the executor of the estate. Her meager assets are divided among Beck's siblings, and Deborah is left with the house. Beck is left with a brooch which couches what appears to be a cubic zirconia, certainly a fake. It turns out that the brooch is no fake, and in fact, what is couched in there is the Florentine diamond. It's important to note that Helen always lived frugally and seemingly had little money. Helen was a German and was one of 50 children saved from the Holocaust by a wealthy Philadelphia couple in 1939. In fact, this real event was the subject of an HBO documentary entitled 50 Children, The Rescue Mission of Mr. and Mrs. Krause. Like many Holocaust survivors, she never spoke of this journey across the ocean or of those she left behind. But that and the losses she suffered provide a subtext for the family's dysfunction. Looking at the dynamics within the family, one can see Meyerson's subtle analysis of the effects of intergenerational trauma. Aside from the intertwining mysteries of Helen's origins, the Habsburg dynasty, and the Florentine diamond, I enjoyed learning about gemstones and the concept of civil forfeiture. In civil forfeiture, if there are no papers proving a gem is rightfully yours, the law recognizes the story of why it might be yours. And quite a story this is. You'll have to read it.
Twin sisters Desiree and Stella were born into the small black community of Mallard, Louisiana. The town was founded by their ancestor Alphonse generations before and was intended to be a place for people like himself, black people with very light skin. So Desiree and Stella are very much a product of that. They have very, very, very light skin. And at age 16, they run away from Mallard. They go to live in New Orleans for about a year before Stella disappears and Desiree decides to go her own way as well. So Desiree goes east, marries a man with very dark skin, has a daughter with him, and eventually returns to Mallard with her daughter, who also has very dark skin. So the first part of the book follows Desiree, looks at her relationship with her mother, who still lives in the area, looks at how she and her daughter are perceived by the people of Mallard, and always in the back of her mind is her sister Stella. And later in the book, it follows Stella's life, and we learn that she is currently passing as white, living in suburban Los Angeles in an upper middle class area. She marries a white man, has a daughter with very light skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes. And the book kind of follows both sisters and their lived experiences, how they understand their identity, how they interact with their family, how they interact with their community. And later in the book, it follows the daughters' lives as well, so Jude being Desiree's daughter and Kennedy being Stella's daughter. So it follows their lives as well and how they make sense of their family history, how they make sense of their connections to their mothers and to their communities. So this is Brit Bennett's second book. She creates very beautiful and very complex characters It's a very character-driven novel. And beyond, the main characters of Desiree and Stella, there are a number of supporting characters that she really goes into detail with, and you become invested into their journeys and their lived experiences. The book obviously covers some very difficult topics like race, like gender, like class, and it explores those in a really interesting and unique way. Britt Bennett, writes beautifully, very descriptive language, and it really, I think, especially given more recent conversations on things such as race, racism, and anti-racism. So I think this is a very poignant read, as it really focuses on identity, specifically identities around race and gender, and how those interact with society at large, which is something that I think a lot of these recent conversations have been focusing on. So this book has been getting a lot of hype. It's at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. A number of prominent book clubs have used this book, and it has also been signed on to be created as a series for HBO. So I would definitely recommend reading this. It is a beautiful book, and I hope you enjoy The Vanishing Half.
Old Lovegood Girls by Gail Goodwin. 82-year-old Gail Goodwin has been writing novels for 50 years. Her latest proves that she has no intention of coasting. So says the Washington Post. I agree. This book is a richly layered novel based on a lifetime of reflection on friendship. Like me, the Post relished the book and said, in a culture obsessed with youth, it's a welcome reminder that age and wisdom have certain advantages. The story begins in 1958 at Lovegood College for Women, a Southern school steeped in tradition and good manners. The school's dean and the dorm mistress are figuring out the proper placement for incoming students. The dean remembers an earlier time when students were allowed to bring one horse, just one. Attempting to devise a mutually beneficial roommate situation in the dorm, they match intelligent, troubled, but oddly named Farron Hood with Meredith Jellicoe, the beautiful and happy daughter of successful tobacco farmers. The hope is that sunny, outgoing Mary will be a steadying influence on Farron, who has fled from an abusive stepfather after the possible murder of her mother. There are far-reaching consequences of this brilliant match. Built around Farron and Meredith's infrequent meetings and correspondence, the story shows a lifetime of commonality in these two women who would seem at the outset to have nothing in common. But as Farron says, once someone is inside your reference aura, that person stays there forever. The author spools out the women's stories in a thoughtful, elliptical fashion, circling back to defining moments that include shocking losses and unanticipated romance. Masterfully crafted, Old Lovegood Girls is a powerful friendship story. It is about friendship repeatedly lost and found over the course of 50 years in a changing America. It is a beautiful story of transformation and continuity.
This is Happiness by Niall Williams, a book that I did not want to end. It's set in Faha, which is a small village in Ireland. The writing descriptions are beautiful. There's a whole page devoted to how many ways it can rain in Faha. Two main characters. You've got Noel, who is a 17-year-old who was studying for the priesthood and comes home in a crisis of faith. And we've also got Christy, who's a man in his 60s, lodging with Noel's family. Christy's job is to convince the villagers that they want electricity. And electricity involves planting great big poles from Finland and running miles and miles of wire. And of course the villagers say, but we've always lived this way. It's fine. Candles are good in the dark. Christy and Noel become great friends. They share a room. And some of my favorite scenes are when the two of them go on their bicycles in the dark to the pubs in town and visit each pub in turn, drinking beer at each one, trying to find the best local musical talent. Of course, they ride those bikes back in the dark, and you've got to laugh. This is an immersive novel of almost 400 pages, and life moves slowly in Faha, which is just fine with me. This may be my favorite book in a long time.
Charlie Besson is tired, lonely, and depressed. He hates his job writing for a local TV news station in Los Angeles, and he finds it hard to sustain any sort of personal relationship. So when he bumps into a well-connected acquaintance with a job opportunity, he jumps at the chance to shake things up a little bit. The job is personal assistant to Kathy Cannon, who is a legendary film actress most known for her role as Priestess Talara in the sci-fi movie Nova Quest, which Charlie watched all the time growing up and even had Priestess Talara action figures. So he's very excited at this opportunity. He goes in for an interview, he's starstruck, he's looking around at all the eclectic decor at Kathy Cannon's mansion, and he gets the job, and he's still in that sort of honeymoon phase. He's going to all these parties, meeting all these famous people, spending time with someone that he looked up to growing up. And as time goes on, he kind of quickly realizes that the job is a lot more than what it seemed. He is in charge of, administering medications for bipolar disorder, which Kathy Cannon struggles from, and is really in charge of trying to keep her safe and organized despite her history with mental health issues and substance abuse, which is a lot to put on one individual. So the book kind of explores, the highs and the lows. There are moments where Kathy has manic episodes and Charlie has to kind of work with her to try to get her back into a safe environment. And then there are the fun parts where they're traveling the world and going to all these fancy places and meeting all these fancy people. So it really explores the highs and the lows and all the realities that they face. And it really goes into Charlie's life and kind of how he slowly starts to lose his own personal identity and becomes swept up by Kathy Cannon. The book is by Byron Lane, who was a personal assistant to Carrie Fisher for a number of years. It's very obvious that it's drawn from those experiences. Carrie Fisher, known for playing Princess Leia in Star Wars, among other things, also struggled with mental health issues. So this book is kind of a parallel to his experiences as Carrie Fisher's personal assistant. But it's very entertaining, it's funny, it's sad, you become very invested in the characters. So if you're looking for a way to detach but also have a meaningful read, I would highly recommend this book.
Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. During the last few months, I found myself desiring an alternate reality, or at least wondering about one. Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld does just that. It posits, what if Hillary Clinton never married Bill? What would her life and her political career look like? Rodham skillfully interweaves actual historical events with fictional ones. For example, Bill entered the presidential race in October of 1991. Clarence Thomas's confirmation hearings were also held in the fall of 1991. What Anita Hill claimed Thomas said to her would be shocking even by today's standards, and they were way too juicy to leave out of this book. The events, the hearings, their outcome, and Bill Clinton's nomination were independent of one another, but the hearings may have enabled Bill to win a majority of delegates in the Democratic primaries of 1992, in spite of the numerous sexual misconduct allegations. We also know that on Sunday, January 26, 1992, on 60 Minutes, in a time slot following the Super Bowl, Hillary Clinton responded to questions about her husband's reported infidelity, and specifically his 12-year affair with Jennifer Flowers. Her defense of Bill and their marriage probably saved his career, but left Americans with, shall we say, a complicated attitude toward her that would last the whole of her political career. But what if the woman on 60 Minutes had been someone else? What if Hillary had given Bill the boot long before they reached this point? Although the second part of the book answers this question, the first part shows us a young, impressionable Hillary whose attraction to Bill is magnetic. We also see her later in life reflecting on that great passion and now engaged in a not so appropriate affair with a married professor, someone she teaches with. When she reflects, there was a sadness I felt in this moment, an amalgamated sadness. I felt sad that I didn't have a true partner with whom to share a bed and discuss daily indignities and inside jokes. I felt sad that most marriages, beyond the first few years, seem very unhappy. I felt sad that in the background of my life, the man I'd once wildly been excited about had become a person it would have been much simpler to never have met. I highly recommend Rodham regardless of your political affiliation. It presents Hillary as a flawed politician who makes morally ambiguous choices at the altar of success. And it also shows us a fictional internal landscape not available from the public persona we think we know. As we enter yet another political season, this book is worth reading. It also has some comic aspects to it and a parade of political characters we know now quite well, maybe too well.
The Second Home by Christina Clancy is a good summer beach read. The author, who lives in Milwaukee, grew up summering at Cape Cod in an old family house. She successfully sets this book with a family who lives in Milwaukee and summers at the Cape in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, in an old family house. The two main characters are sisters Poppy and Anne. Somehow they convinced their parents to adopt a teenage boy named Michael. Michael quickly became the darling of the family, and the sisters' loyalties were quite divided. Anne took a nanny job with a very wealthy Cape family, and that went horribly wrong. Poppy escaped into surfing and drugs with a wild crowd. No one was paying much attention to them because all the attention was focused on Michael. 15 years later, the story resumes when both of their parents died. Poppy and Anne have to make very difficult decisions about selling the two family homes. A character emerges from the past. New characters are introduced, and the ending is not what you thought was going to happen. I cannot say that this book is beautifully written. I can say that I recommend it as a good summer beach read. It has satisfying themes of family and drama and suspense and romance, and I especially enjoyed feeling like I had escaped to the Cape.
This is How I Lied by New York Times best-selling author Heather Gudenkauf. It's a powerful psychological thriller that delves into the investigation of a 25-year-old murder. It's also the story of how the power of secrets shape and destroy lives. The book takes place in a small town in Iowa. The town's main attraction is Cave State Park, a popular destination for hikers and splunkers. It was in one of those caves that a 15-year-old girl's strangled body was found a quarter of a century ago. The dead girl, Eve, was discovered by her sister Nola and also by her best friend Maggie. Now the cold case has been reopened. The investigating officer is Maggie. There are plenty of suspects, even within Eve's and Maggie's own families. Eve's sister Nola was and remains very cruel. Maggie's brother Colin was a high school misfit. Even Maggie's husband Sean is keeping secrets about the night of the murder. And so is Maggie. She's not the most reliable of narrators. We go back and forth from 1995 to 2020. We see Eve's life as a teenager, and then in current times we follow along in the reopened investigation of her murder. Suspense and thriller fans will not be disappointed with this twisty tale featuring characters who lived for decades harboring secrets, harboring lies. Publishers Weekly says fans of dogged, resourceful female detectives will cheer Maggie every step of the way.
Freddie Gray's death in 2015 was a catalyst for a number of demonstrations against police brutality in the Baltimore area and across the country. This book explores the days following Freddie Gray's death as community members in Baltimore react. Each chapter is dedicated to a different perspective. So we have someone that is a public defender working in Baltimore, a community organizer who lost her brother to police brutality a few years earlier, to a police officer, to the vice president of the Baltimore Orioles. So these different perspectives are all brought together to give a more comprehensive understanding of the events that took place in 2015. The author of this book, Wes Moore, is a native of Baltimore himself, and you can tell how much he cares about his city through his writing. He also is a CEO of a nonprofit that works to address poverty, and a lot of this book focuses on the elements within Baltimore itself that work to create a situation like what happened in 2015. So, he addresses the poverty rate, unemployment, the water supply for Baltimore. All of those things are addressed and are tied into Freddie Gray's death and the response to that event. And it's a really powerful book. These different perspectives are all coming together to kind of give people who aren't part of the Baltimore community a better idea of just how those events impacted the city and its people. And with the recent events around George Floyd's death, I think this book is a good reminder of how these events can impact communities on a local level, as well as inspire national movements and national demonstrations. So I hope you enjoy reading 5 Days.
Friends and Strangers by J. Courtney Sullivan. We all have major life cycle events that can create bonds between unlikely people. Elizabeth, a writer in her 30s, is a mother for the first time. She has just moved from Brooklyn to a small college town 250 miles away, far from her friends, her publisher, and her former life of 20 years. Rather than write, she spends hours on a Facebook chat group composed of new mothers from Brooklyn, as well as on Instagram following her trending sister. Enter Sam, a college student Elizabeth hires 3 days per week to babysit her son. Unlike Elizabeth, Sam comes from a working-class family. She supports herself by working in the college cafeteria and by babysitting. But like Elizabeth, she's at a crossroads. Although she dreams of a career in the art world, she is romantically involved with a British man 10 years her senior, a man who wants Sam to be a country wife. Intellectually, he's not her equal, and what is more, he has secrets. The backdrop of this book is especially relevant today as people are losing their jobs. Through the character of Elizabeth's father-in-law, a victim of the downturned economy, Sullivan provides social commentary. To quote Ron Charles of the Washington Post, Friends and Strangers will be shelved as domestic fiction, but it's as much a story about money and politics. Everywhere in the background we can detect the wreckage of an economy no longer capable of sustaining middle-class life. The cute college town is actually a tiny oasis of trendy shops and vegan grocery stores surrounded by miles of shuttered industries. Elizabeth's father-in-law has lost his transport business and his house under pressure from Uber, the app that frees drivers from timesheets, health insurance, and a living wage. The strength of Friends and Strangers lies in Sullivan's depiction of day-to-day life, be it that of a mother, wife, and writer, or of a student working to support herself through school. Although it takes on serious personal issues such as the emotional and physical toll of infertility and its treatment, Sullivan's classic wit and humor, her depiction of, for example, a meeting of a book club in the neighborhood, will have you laughing. Ultimately, Friends and Strangers offers a sympathetic look at who we are in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, and how that impacts the choices we make. This is an engaging read that will have you thinking about its characters long after you turn the last page.
Thinking Inside the Box, Adventures with Crosswords and the Puzzling People Who Can't Live Without Them by Adrienne Raphael. This is the story of crossword puzzles, their birth and development, the people who make them, the people who love them. The first word cross puzzle ran in 1913 in New York World's Fun Supplement. New York World was a daily at the time. The puzzle was created as filler by the Fun section's editor, who had a hole to fill in his section of the paper. The puzzle's instructions asked readers to fill in the small squares with words that agree with the following definitions. By 1924, newspaper readers were mad crazy for crosswords. However, the New York Times proclaimed that the passion for puzzles is dying out fast and will be long forgotten in a few months. The Times was so wrong. How the Times came to not only change its mind, but also to become the epicenter of the American crossword culture is a large part of the book. The author delves into how crosswords are now electronically generated, how they have become woven into the fabric of TV shows like Sex and the City and even The Simpsons, how they are printed on everything from shower curtains to my husband's pajamas, to a pair of tights I got to subscribe to the New Yorker magazine. Believe me, those tights are way in the back of my sock drawer. The author journeys to Stamford, Connecticut for the annual American Crossword Puzzle Tournament, and she describes her voyage on a crossword-themed cruise that celebrated 75 years of the New York Times puzzle. She also visits with Will Shortz, who is the New York Times crossword editor, and he's also NPR's official puzzle master. And the author tries her own hand at constructing a New York Times puzzle. Spoiler alert, her puzzle is rejected. As one reviewer notes, this book is packed with the sort of beautifully observed details you would expect from a New Yorker contributor.
One Amazing Thing by Chitra Divakaruni was published 10 years ago, and it's such a good read for now. It takes place in an Indian embassy. We presume in Los Angeles or San Francisco. We meet our main characters as they are gathered in the lobby, waiting to process visas and passports and other really important business. And then there's an earthquake, and everybody panics. They run down to the basement and start arguing with each other. Everybody has a better idea of what they should do next, and people are fighting and they're just being awful to each other. When a teenage girl says, "Stop. Let's each tell the story of one amazing thing that's happened in our life." And oh, the storytelling, fabulous. I enjoyed it very much when it first came out, and I'm enjoying it again now.